Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This is the first of two budget work sessions that we will be involved with the Wayne County budget with Mr. Smith, the county attorney, and the staff. We welcome you each this morning. Mr. Aycott will be joining us shortly. He's been held up by the train this morning. But before we get started, I would like to ask Commissioner Pate if we would bow for a moment and have our invocation. Thank you.
Okay. Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, as we gather here today to perform the work of the people, I ask that you help lead us down the right path. And as we take this journey together, please protect our citizens, our men and women in uniform, and these commissioners as we all work together for the continued and better future of Wayne County, North Carolina, and our nation. We humbly ask for your blessings in the name of the Son. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And Commissioner Mayo with the pledge.
Stand, please. Flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll get started right away with our budget. Each one of you have your budget book. Thank you so much again for getting this to us. And we will, with nothing more to do, we would go ahead and start this. Mr. Smith?
Yes, sir.
This is an informal work session. There's certainly a lot of questions that we have this morning, but we'll start on page 1 and we'll begin with, of course, if you want to go back over the message and your overview, or if you want to start with revenues.
Mr. Chairman.
But we'll let it, yes, sir, Mr. Daugherty.
I'd like to, if I could, have an opening remark here.
Sure.
You know, this is a unique situation, and my first time of doing this. And in going through the budget, I'm hoping that we will all agree that there'll be no sacred cows here. You know, it's a tough decision to have to go through a budget and make decisions of where you make cuts, where you make pluses, where you add, subtract. And a lot of people are affected by this budget. I'm hoping that this time that we can go through this budget and look at all avenues, all taxes that are coming into our county, all expenditures, and that we not set aside those special areas that we not touch. And I hope that we'll all be able to have some open dialogue on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Daugherty. Any other open comments from the commissioners? Certainly welcomed.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like
Mr. Bell.
This will be my 13th budget since being on the Board of Commissioners. And I'm just going to plug the Board of Commissioners for the past 10 years. We developed a county that most counties around east of Raleigh were jealous of. I mean, when you look at our financial arrangements, when you look at our spending, and when you look at what we have accomplished here in Wayne County, look at our credit ratings and all that stuff. And I'm just hoping as we deliver on this budget or study this budget, that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And, you know, it took us a long time to get to where we are today as a county. I remember when Mr. Smith came, we were in, well, it looked pretty good on paper, but we didn't have any money. I know it's easy to cut taxes, but what I'm saying is, if we cut taxes now, we will have to go back and raise them a couple of years from now. And that's what we got to watch out for. It get the people more upset when you got to go back and raise the tax than it does when you actually make some cuts. So I hope anything that we do to this budget is absolutely necessary and that we're not going to damage this county and get us in the same shape as some of the surrounding counties have been in for the past 5 or 6 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Any others? If not, let's get started.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Smith.
Welcome to June, the month of budget. So appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Just to let you know, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Holt is with her family down in Florida and still praying and wishing them terrific wishes and lots of blessings that all that will go well. In looking with the budget, obviously, I've given you your budget message already, and what you're seeing is with the budget recommendation that I've given you, a reduction in the actual tax rate from its present rate of 72.5 to 67.50. This is also giving you, and I thought it was important, Mr. Chairman, because a couple have asked, and I think most of you understand it, but maybe for the public's sake, it's I think just for edification, net and gross budget. Just to explain that very quickly. I am using net budget, not to confuse, but to really try to center on what dollars actually impact local citizens and businesses. And the $120 million that you see in this budget, in this recommended budget, net budget are all of those revenues, all of those expenditures that actually impact locally. The gross budget has transfers and monies that pass through from other state grants and federal dollars that do not impact us at all. Not matched, not anything. So if you really want to talk about, it's kind of like getting your paycheck. You want to know what you really take home? It's that was on that pay stub. Well, the net is the pay stub, and we're looking at true impact of what you're able to pay your insurance and your light bill. That's why that is. So just so we understood that. I've given you several items here that a number of us have been working on for a couple weeks. First, you'll see a sheet like this. You'll see 8.5 by 11 on top, and it says budget info attached. And we're working off of version 4. It has a list of outside agencies, our 8.5 by 11 sheet. You see that one? And then behind that are some 8.5 by, I guess these are 14 sheets. Gets into a little detail of items that we cut or changed or altered to get to where we are. Okay, and I'm just referencing these now, and then we'll be referring to them. Then you look at your other sheets. You'll see these that are marked in blue, green, and yellow. One says Fund 110 expenditures, and you see original, amended, version 4, a difference, and then a difference of amended version. Now, what we will be going by today is this last blue column, because what that is that is the difference of the original 2013 budget, the version 4, and the difference, that is the difference to get us to approximately just over $1 million of changes to get us where we were in the net budget. And then, of course, when we go through, you're going to see sheets behind that, grants from 111 through 884, and then revenues. We probably will hit those on Monday, the revenues. Today, I thought what we do, if this is appropriate, I really was going to start at the front of the book and walk through departments. And then as you have questions, just ask them. If we don't know, I will tell you, I've got Janice Rice with me today. Janice has been working closely with me along with Pam and the other staff. What she has is, we call this the black box. This has all of the requests in writing from all the departments and agencies. It has all the backup, the revenue sheets, the capital improvement plan. It has everything in here. So if we get into a detail, and we may have to refer to it because sometimes it gets very deep into it. So when you see her scrambling over here, I'm pulling sheets to make sure, because I don't want to give you something that is incorrect. Now, I also want to clarify this, Mr. Chairman. If I feel like that I'm not sure, I'm going to tell you I'm not sure. And then so let's note it, and Marcia's taking notes, and Janice, Barbara, that we'll note, and that we're going to get that back to you on Monday or in an hour. If we could just kind of have that as an understanding, because if we're not clear, because this is $100 and some million, sometimes we don't remember. So just give us that opportunity if you would. So anyways, we kind of get this train rolling this morning and kind of get in a groove of how this will go over the next couple days. I thought we would just start working through, departments, and the first being your lucky Board of Commissioners. You're kind of first in the book.
So we're going to flip over to
If you flip in your tabs to you'll see that first tab that says BOC 4110 in your big book.
Lee,
Yes, sir.
let's begin with just the fees.
Okay. Fees. You can do that.
Let's just start with just going through the fees.
Okay.
And I would really like the agenda to begin, when we start this, is revenues.
Okay.
And show from the fee, starting from the fees, and going through all of the revenues and how we acquire the revenues
Okay. I can do
from
that.
a gross standpoint and then into a net standpoint
Okay.
with the revenues.
We can do that.
And then it might take 30, 45 minutes.
Okay.
And then when we get into the block of expenditures, I think they'll understand it better
Okay.
if we do that.
Absolutely. Same thing here on the board. Okay, just so you and I are on the same page. Okay. Well, if starting with the fee schedule down, and you've got a fee tab in your big book, there are no changes in any fee in any department. Now, if you were discussing, we're glad to discuss them. I've made no changes, except for solid waste, from $30 to $31.50. We had talked about it in our solid waste committee. We talked about it in our meetings a couple of times. We did that because we are starting up, well, not starting up, the electronic recycling program. Even though the state's going to pick some of that up, that is a requirement of the state. We have a couple other items that we've got to correct out at the landfill. We had to have something to pick up that cost. Also, we got rid of all of our exceptions. We had and I also want to clarify this. I've had some calls from the Mobile Home Association. The mobile home parks are still exempted from this. They fall under, they have to have their dumpster, so they fall outside of this. They get charged the tipping fee when that dumpster gets dumped. Now, those folks in those parks still can go to the convenience centers, but they're not getting charged for them. I just want to clarify that, okay? And I have people on the outside who question that also, but I just wanted you to understand how it's working, that they're not being charged as a mobile home park. They are not being charged. It's just the tipping fee. So I have no changes in fees except the tipping fee.
They have no charges if they have a dumpster.
That's right. Now there are some, you're right, I'm glad you clarified that.
Just the real small ones, I mean, it's
There are
it's
some who
better to
actually have
pay the money.
pickup.
Right.
Yeah, there are some who actually pay a Waste Industries or Onslow container to pick up trash cans,
yeah.
and they build it into their rent.
Right.
It's fine.
Right.
And in that case, they would be charged those individual fees. You had a gentleman the other day who talked about their subdivision, that subdivision does not fall under the mobile home park rules. It is a subdivision that they have to be charged individually. They're individual owners. It's not a mobile home park. It's totally different. Now, the gentleman came up 2 meetings ago, or a meeting ago, I believe. But anyway,
Excuse me, are there any subdivisions that have a, box like the mobile homes do? Are they charged or nothing like that? It's just an individual.
yeah, because those individuals, if they own those parcels, the individual who owns it is going to be charged, with the exception of mobile home parks, defined by planning.
Okay.
The individual will be given the assessment through the tax office of $45 annually.
I just want to understand.
excuse me on that.
Yes.
I thought the policy was that if the park had a private hauler that came in and handled the garbage, they were exempt. Is that not the case? Are you exempting all mobile home parks?
They're exempt if they fall under the rule that you just stated.
Okay,
They have to have a box
okay.
or pay someone individually to pick up a can for each parcel. If they do that, because a mobile home park can be owned in its entirety by an individual or a company. That being the case, they can all use the dumpster, or that mobile home park owner could have a separate, with a recycling unit at each. We don't care how they do it, just so they do it. But they're still charged that's up to them. But if they fall under those park rules, they can do either one, it's up to them. And I think it's a mixed on how they do it.
An example.
Wait a
of-
second, wait a
Oh,
second.
okay.
Let me follow up on that just
Yeah.
a bit, because I recall of a problem where a park owner was allowing trash just to be accumulated, I think over in your district. They did not have a private carrier, and it became a health hazard. They had a box, so to speak. And I think we have to be very careful to make sure that we have the rule that there is
They have to be enforced.
well, you have to have it to where there actually is a private waste hauler that provides a dumpster and actually on a regular basis removes that
We have
garbage.
two issues that I know of in the county where I think there's a problem.
Okay.
One in the north, one in the south. And I'm still not clear on, I know we've sent Julian out to go check, Julian Nails to check, where that person says, well, I pick up the trash and I do it. Well, I don't know, but it says in our solid waste rule that they would have a private hauler.
Correct.
Well, the individual says, well, I am the private hauler.
Well, a licensed private hauler then.
Well, that's
I
what
think
it
we need to
says.
tighten that a bit
Well,
because
we've talked about
garbage can
that.
cause a lot of health problems.
Absolutely. And it usually, you'll find in those same parks, not always, but you could then see them not being compliant in all the other issues too. You begin to see other things happen. So you're right, but I know of two, and it's problematic. So it's not, but it's not widespread. That's the minority.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Aycock?
As an example, a mobile home park with 3 mobile homes, that's considered a mobile home park. All right, if, say you've got one with 4 mobile homes in it, it's actually more economical for the park owner to go ahead and pay the county the assessment fees and be done with it.
That's correct.
I mean,
That's correct.
right, right.
And let them haul to
Right,
the convenience
right,
center.
right.
Or that individual pay a XYZ corporation to
Right.
pick my can up.
Right,
And you could do that.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I assume that these private haulers are licensed in some way.
They are.
They-
In
So,
fact, they
I-
pay a fee annually, and we verify that they are a licensed hauler to operate. You cannot operate in Wayne County as a hauler without getting a license in Wayne County.
I mean, I think you could solve the problem by saying that it not be a private, but a private
This
licensed.
is a licensed conduit or a licensed hauler.
Yeah.
And in fact, it says that, I think, in the solid waste ordinance, licensed hauler or something to that effect. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but, and we verify them every year.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayo?
Yeah, one of the instances that I ran across is, the no trash was being picked up, and that's one of the ones that you're talking about, Mr. Smith. But what happened is that once they were required to have garbage pickup, the actual mobile home owners, renters, if you will, in a lot of cases, ended up paying the tab. They turned right around and raised their rent $25 a month, or $15 a month. So it's really hard for a occupancy in a mobile home, renting or whatever, and they're living on fixed income, to look at these increases that come about because of the park owner, reverting that cost back. The question is that who was paying for it 4 or 5 years ago? Okay? If they were having garbage pickup 4 or 5 years ago, so it's sort of a catch-22, if you will, because the park people that are renting and so forth are going to end up either way footing most of the bill. In that particular case you're talking about.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Smith?
Okay. So that's the only fee change. Was there anything about any fees that you wanted to discuss? Now, you recall in the inspections presentation, they did ask us to take a look at their fees. The staff and I did take a look, but my assessment was, in looking at where we were economically, looking at trying to develop and grow development in the county, that we stay where we are for now, and that we assess it over the next year, and then have maybe the planning board take a look at it, if that's possible to see, are our fees appropriate? But I didn't want to make any knee-jerk reaction to, are they high, are they low? In comparison to counties around us, it's kind of a mixed bag. So I left the fees the same.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Donnery.
On our Office of Emergency Service fees, it's my understanding we're starting to have, or have had, and continuing to have, a problem where individuals are calling for 911 and calling for ambulance service to be provided for extremely minor occurrences. My finger hurts.
We call them boo-boo
I got-
calls.
I
We
mean-
call them boo-boo calls.
Boo-boo calls, but that's a drain on county resources.
Sure.
And undoubtedly, it's costing our county a great deal of money. And I think that, I realize we can't do much on the fee basis, but I do want to bring it up. And I think that we need to talk to our legislators about having some options to where we do not provide service. If someone turns around and says, my finger hurts, and we're going to put them in an ambulance, we're going to carry them, we got 2 trained individuals there, we got a $250,000 ambulance, we're taking them to the hospital, dumping on the hospital to their resources, and we're going to need to have some ability for those on the scene
Sure.
to actually say, well, it really is not an emergency. So I just want to bring that up since it's on the fees.
People can refuse to be transported, but when you do an assessment on someone, and I used to be in EMTI, and I've been through this, you would assess and go, this person really doesn't need to be in the ambulance, but you by law had to transport them if they requested to be transported. And you're right, because our cost is our cost. When you start that engine and you roll with 2 paramedics on board,
That's right.
the cost is the cost.
Yeah.
But people know they get into ED in the front door in seconds.
Well, and you're right, and there's where the problem is. Because
Don't write that
if
down.
you arrive at in an ambulance, undoubtedly you go to the front of the line. And we're having a real problem there. And
Sure.
it's
That's an ongoing issue, and absolutely, I think that needs to be addressed. Absolutely.
and-
Anything legislators can do to help us on that would be great. That's a problem.
And then, Mr. Chairman, on sewer fees, have we analyzed our fees and have we had any rate adjustments or anything regarding sewer fees?
Not this year. We actually adjusted down about, Janice, 5-6 years ago. We adjusted our rates down by about 50%. Because when I arrived here some years ago, I looked at that, it's an enterprise. And, we have several entities that kind of, and pardon my French here, dump into our Genoa system that all goes to the Goldsboro system. We have an agreement with the city of Goldsboro for capacity. We own 650,000 gallons of capacity with the city of Goldsboro, which gives us the outside rate, which gives our customers a break. We have a lot that flows, passes through us that we don't get dollars for because it's for the city of Goldsboro. That has to be credited. But we took a look at it, and I tried to have enough built into the fee. We were actually, at one point, in my opinion, we're making too much money. So I backed the fee off because I had built a sufficient capital reserve for repair and still think it's appropriate. But I've got probably a couple $100,000 we're going to have to do this year at the Genoa system. But I've got an appropriate reserve. We back that fee off. We cannot be higher than the city of Goldsboro, ever. That's the agreement. And we are not. We are below the city of Goldsboro, but I'm still earning enough money to maintain a reserve and pay the bills. That's where we are. So this year, we are not offering up to alter those fees at all.
Okay.
But we have looked at it, and it's a continuous issue.
Mr. Chairman, I did that.
Mr. Pate.
On the mobile homes, go back to mobile homes on the fees, you charge $65 for all mobile homes, then you charge another $65 for interior inspection. What's the difference? It's like we're kind of doubling up there.
Tell me what,
It's
what page you on?
page 5. This is in the center of the page. Just to clear that up in my mind, what the difference is there.
I think that was part, Borden, of the change on mobile home inspections made several years ago, where you actually had to do some things to make sure if there was unsafe situations as far as flooring, that type thing. So we actually required an interior inspection.
What's the all mobile home thing? I mean, that's that. I just don't understand if you're gonna charge one thing, why don't you inspect the whole thing at one time?
Yeah, we'll need, I'm gonna have to confirm that, but I
Yeah,
hate
you understand what
to
I'm
quote
asking?
it, I remember it, but I hate to quote it, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll confirm it. We're making a note of those things we're gonna follow.
I was
up
just
on.
curious, that just caught my
Okay.
attention.
Steve could get up there and probably boom, but we'll confirm that way you'll have something in writing.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Mr. Aycock.
Yes, Mr. Smith, on page 15, the Wayne Center,
Okay.
the two bottom items, they're identical. Is that, are they supposed to be for two separate things, or?
You see that, Jess, on 15? We just duplicate that. Is it just a duplicate? I think it's just duplication. It's got copied twice, it looks like.
Okay, well, I kind of thought that, but I just,
I think it's just a duplication. I think probably when we were doing those a couple years ago, we may have just carried those. We'll look at it. I think it's just a duplication.
okay.
Yeah.
On the next page,
Mhm.
additional fee $20 per hour for one employee, additional fee $15 per hour for second employees.
Mhm.
Aren't our employees worth the same thing?
Well, we're actually giving a little bit of a cost break, because what we're looking at is typically if I've got one person there, it takes a little bit longer. With two, I can get it done quicker. But we usually, even with our officers, charge $15, but if I've got one, I'll charge 20. That's just part of how we've done it over the
Okay,
years.
all right.
Yeah. They don't get those dollars, that's just a reimbursement back to us,
Right.
but they get it done quicker if they're multiple.
Okay.
But if it's one, that setup takes a while. And I worked pretty heavily with Deborah West, Janice, years ago to do this, because a lot of folks, and it's used, I think, 200 and some days a year, it's rented, so.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Daugherty.
On page 15, you've got a vehicle redemption fee, junk car ordinance, $10 per vehicle.
Yes.
What is that?
It's part of that vehicle ordinance.
Do we actually go in and remove the junk vehicle from the property, and if they want to redeem it, they only pay us $10?
I think that is correct. We can remove them under the ordinance.
But $10 would not possibly reimburse the
But
county.
if we use a towing company, they would have to pay that cost to that company also.
In addition.
So that, in other words, that doesn't flow through us. We have an agreement with a couple of companies. So if they go pick it up and it's $175,
Right?
they got to pay that fee. Because it would get held, we don't have a vehicle lot to secure vehicles. So they would take it, let's say Edwards would pick up for me. He can secure it on his lot. They would pay our fee plus whatever they charge for picking up the car. They have to pay both. And if the car stays there long enough, instead of the county selling the cars, there's this whole thing we have to do. We have, I guess by law, Borden, they can sell the vehicle, yeah. So, and we let the hauler do that, and we stay out of that business because we tried to get into that, way too complicated. Another county said, stay out of it, let them handle it, and we let them sell them. It's not worth the money. We found we were going in the hole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Pate.
on 17, the 4-H after-school fees, what exactly is that?
Say that again, I didn't hear you.
On 17, the 4-H after-school site fees.
Yes, that is a self-sustaining program, 4-H after school, and there are multiple sites across the county, and these are the fees that they set to do, it's after school.
Don't they get
daycare.
grant money or something for those 4-H?
We get some grant money, but they get grant money, they get like the 21st century grants, but 21st century, but the fees carry that program 100%. So this is the charges that we charge for those kids to be there.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is Connie, runs that program, Connie Greason runs that program. After school, and it's done in schools.
Yeah, at Thomas Road in Eastern Wayne is what it
I
is.
think there's 3 sites.
5 of them.
You're right, they're all 5 sites.
Okay.
Is there a waiting list?
Yes, there's always a waiting list. Always. Yeah.
It's a good program.
It is a good program, but you can only take so many.
Right.
And, because and there's a breaking point of, do you add more people, and then county money have to pick it up? We do it so it's self-supporting.
Is it income-based?
I believe it is. Isn't there a sliding scale based on income? But Connie, I'd have to get details from that, but we can do that and let you know.
I would think it would. Okay.
Any
Yeah, if you
other?
look at the board is asking on the DSS program is a DSS daycare program. That's a separate program. Yeah. Most of these are private pay.
Any other comments or questions on fees? Was the pleasure of the board would like to accept these and move on? And are there any changes that the board would wish to comment on, or reductions of fees?
I think I've got all my questions answered.
Okay. So one question on fees. Several fees in reference to planning as far as rezoning request and or building request. Are fees refunded when the requests are not granted?
No.
I didn't think so.
When an individual comes in and has a vision and goes through the expense of having plans drawn up and following the proper protocol in order to build, and then do due diligence to have rezoning, I understand that they have to come in and ask for a permit for the process to begin and pay in advance. And there are instances where the consumer or the citizen has been denied. And I understand there's a process for the citizen, certainly there's a process for us to provide that service. Now, if it doesn't go through, then my concern is, why doesn't the consumer get his money back? We are in the service industry, but if the proper protocol has been gone through the process and it gets to the governance, whether it be in a planning board or in a commission mode, then if it's denied, then why don't we refund the funds that he submitted as a fee? Just some comments from the commissioners. Any, Mr. Mayo?
I would say that would be really hard to determine, because some projects are denied not because of anything the county has done. It's just that it could be for a multitude of reasons, where it might be EPA, environmental, whatever it could be. How do you determine the justification of refunding that fee? I think that would be the big question.
It would almost be, this is think of it this way, because I hear what you're saying. It's kind of like environmental health. I get a lot, and I call Kevin and say, Kevin, do a perk test, because I'm going to build a house. And he goes out there and doesn't perk.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah, I have to. When you live in Pamlico County, perk until you build a mound. And I kind of see it that way, but I see what you're talking about. And because some of the process work actually has begun on our side, or that's what I think. But I see where you're coming from on that. And maybe that's something you want the planning board to take a look at over the next year, as we're kind of assessing where we are, our processes. Might be a good question to ask them.
Well, going through these 18 pages of fees, seems to be there's a fee for everything. And I understand we're in the service industry, we're in the service business, and that's why people pay their taxes. But if you take and plant a fee on everything that we do, there's got to be a way that we can have some easement here on the consumer. For example, on page 11, in bold print there, it has any construction started prior to plan approval and permits issued will result in a $100 fee plus permit fees. Well, if I'm an individual and go out there and start a week early, and by some reason I find out that my superintendent did not get the fee or did not get the permit in time, and then I'm assessed another $100 because of it, then it depends on the circumstance. Because I'm not going to be able to get a CO anyway. That's a certificate of occupancy. Or I'm not going to be allowed to proceed with my licensing on electrical, plumbing and heating, and all the other items. It's just like I started a little bit early by accident, but yet I'm going to have to pay $100, more or less a penalty, for starting early. And you can look at both sides of that. But I'm asking that as we go through this fee structure, that we do look at assessing these fees in more ways than just accumulating money for the county to pay for our overhead. And if someone goes through the process of doing all that they're supposed to do, and then it gets to the governance, which gets to the commissioners, and the commissioners deny the request for a rezone and don't give an answer, then the consumer is sitting there with the expense of all the money they've paid, not getting an answer, a clear-cut answer from the commissioners, and not getting those funds refunded, which could be in the thousands of dollars, according to this structure, this fee structure. So I'm just asking that the commissioners maybe want to look at that as we move forward through this fee structure. I was amazed at the dollars and the amounts of fees that are actually being charged. That's my comments on this fee schedule.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, you're exactly right, Mr. Chairman. One of the biggest complaints that I hear is from residential contractors out in the county that before they could even lay the foundation, they've got all these fees that they've got to come up with, and in some cases, those fees can be really cutting into profits, depending on what size house you build and how much it costs you to build it. But that's where I'm hearing a lot of complaints from is new house startups from contractors that the fees over the last 15, 20 years are just gone exorbitant from what they were. So that's my comments. That's what I'm hearing.
Any other comments from commissioners?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Daughter and then Mr. Aycock.
You know, I too am concerned about fees, and I deal with this on a daily basis. And I can say and report to the other commissioners that the fee schedule in Wayne County is probably the least of the surrounding counties, and I'll also have to say that in dealing with the Building Inspections Department here in Wayne County, it has become one of the better counties to deal with. There's a lot of problems in our county where there are interpretations of the regulations by individual inspectors. And I'm just saying in Wayne County, I have to get them an attaboy. They've done a real good job of actually interpreting the regulations more toward the consumer rather than against the consumer. I agree with you in regards to the $100 because I have been assessed that a number of times. However, I decided to pay the $100 so that I could obtain and start construction prior to getting the permit. Now understand, if you start construction prior to a permit, you are really taking a big risk. Because if it is not approved, all of those investments that you've made in that, on those improvements, digging the footer or whatever you may have done, is for naught. So it really is in the best interest of the builder, developer, to make sure you get that permit ahead of time before you start construction. But I have been assessed that $100 many a time.
Mr. Aycock.
Mr. Doherty covered mine, thank you.
Any others?
One question, sir.
Mr. Cromartie?
Mr.
Your microphone, please.
Yeah, I'd like just to direct this to Mr. Smith.
Yes,
Has the fee schedule gone through a major revision over the last 5 or 10 years, or it's just a gradual increase here, increase
By
there?
department.
By
By
department.
department. We had,
The question still
a
sort of
full
remains the same.
review of fees every year, but we do a detailed review within departments probably every 3 to 5 years to see if you're still kind of, let's say, industry standard, if that's a proper word, to look at our area. And Mr. Daugherty is right. We are a little lower, but I really think we tried to be more consumer friendly because we wanted to encourage and still cover our cost. It wasn't that we were going to make $1. If we could break even, we were good. So we do, and Steve looks at them, and he came in this year, Steve Stroud, I'm sorry, and he said, I think we're a little lower, what do you think? And I went, well, my recommendation is to stay the same for now, and let's just see how things go, as long as I'm making it, so. And then the others, they do them. 4-H looks at it every year, and then you've got fees over in the health department every year, so it's by department, they take a look at it. And then, for instance, in EMS, OES, when you look, those are set by Medicaid, and we get those ALS and the BLS, the basic and the advanced life support. Those are set, and they'll come in more than spring, summer. We'll get those, and we have to alter them occasionally.
But since, I'm not asking that you have a list there, but just in your memory, they have not drastically changed up over the last 5?
No. No.
Okay, any others? You want to wrap up fees,
Okay.
Mr. Smith?
All right. So with that, and there's a couple questions we have on that. We'll get those questions back to you and answer those for you.
Any others on fees, commissioners?
Anything else?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In your book, you also have in that next tab, which was the organizational chart. That's something good, I think, for you to take a look at. We may have to make some alterations based on some committees, that type thing. It doesn't cover everything, but this is generally how things work. And I think this is, we have this on the website. It's interesting to see where you have elected officials. It's important for the public to understand, then you have 3 or 4 sets of, elected folks. You have, Register of Deeds, Board of Commissioners, Board of Education, Sheriff. And then you have appointed boards. That structure is important to people understand how it works and where you have authority, but also where you have cooperation, or what we would call dotted lines. So I think this is just good for people to review and try and understand as we move forward. So,
Any comments, questions for Mr. Smith on the organizational chart? As it might even reflect or affect the budget?
I have one.
Mr. Cromartie.
If I can follow the chart. Down on the lower left corner, well, my side, the county municipality appointed boards. Is it just the oversight for appointing the boards, or? And the reason I asked this question because of the fee schedule. Folk, although we may appoint a board, you don't have any control over what they may do.
We appoint members
To serve on the board.
ETJ of the municipalities.
Okay.
So if you have an ETJ around any municipality, you as a board appoint a member. It's at least one that I recall. It could be 2, but it's, extraterritorial jurisdiction, where the municipality has planning jurisdiction. Okay? Their zoning rules apply, the counties do not. Now, there are areas in those ETJs that I find, Gordon, to be a little gray, in areas of junk cars and things like that. When it gets a little testy, municipalities like to say, well, you take that. Well, we're saying no, if it's your ETJ, you take it. Either it's all or nothing. Which is it? So you don't oversee those boards, you appoint a person to that board.
Thank you.
Okay.
And if you fail to do it over a certain period of time, the municipality can appoint a person in your stead.
That's a good question. It's always an interesting conversation.
Any others? I do have two. One, the Wayne County Utilities Committee. I'm sorry. Yes, the Wayne County Utilities Committee, or I thought it might have been commission, but it's committee, under county appointed boards. And the other is Office of Emergency Services. And these both pertain to budgetary ideas or concerns. One, the Wayne County Utilities Committee. You mentioned a few minutes ago, and Mr. Clark, I'm glad he said fees. This pertains to also sewer fees. The 70 Coral Commission has been speaking of interchanges and sewers and sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure, just infrastructure for these interchanges. And there's other areas in the county that have expressed interest in sewer. And you said a while ago that actually you were making too much money, so you brought some of those fees down. That's interesting. I've always thought that you can never make money in sewer. If we have the capacity and we are finding a way that we could break even and provide the service at the same time, if that's what I'm hearing, then with the Utilities Committee needing to meet more often, in the last 5 years, I think I have been to 2 Utilities Committee meetings because that's all that we ever had, not because I didn't attend. It's just that we only had the 2 that I can remember, and both of them were just lunches at a local barbecue joint. So I, went, and that was about it. If we're looking at fees and funding sewer, then we certainly probably need to have this committee to be more active and to define it more so where we can get some good dialogue going in that committee to bring us back some ideas as far as cost, if we can work that through that committee and through the county manager. And by this time next year have some good solid direction, or hopefully even before that, being that road is going to be completed. And I've heard from Transportation Committee, Mr. Daugherty, I've heard you say that, we need to be looking into sewer, particularly as interchanges, but there are other areas of the county also that we probably need to look into. The other, as far as referencing in this budget under this organizational chart, is Office of Emergency Services. We have, as several commissioners have asked me about the tax rate for fire departments, and I do not see here where we have fire departments, but I do know that through conversation with county manager, Office of Emergency Services, you have the EMS 911 and Wayne Net. And of course we have the association, the Firearms Association, and then you have the fire marshal. And the fire marshal, if they fall under the Office of Emergency Services or they do not. I understand that the fire marshal has actually, from talking to Mr. Smith, more things to do at times where the OES cannot sign off on it, or the director of OES cannot, but it takes actual words or directions from the fire marshal.
He takes official action.
Official action. So with the fire marshal and the association and the tax rates and the budgets that our finance director has mentioned from the fire departments, then somewhere, I personally, as just a commissioner, I would like to see another line item added where we're getting some direct communication from the association through the fire marshal, because that is strictly fire departments. And I've seen that happen with the survey and with the fee ordinance that was brought, is that it seemed like the association was not at the table. in full as their elected officials in the association, which is 28 fire departments. Is that right, 28 fire departments, Mr. Aycock? Is it 28, 29? So I just think the organizational chart, if we could look at that and bring in the fire departments under, am I out of line there by asking that, or?
The fire departments are separate corporations, and the county doesn't have anything to do with them except having a contract with them to provide the service in the districts. You, the county commissioners, determine what the tax rate will be after they have made a request of you. But you don't have any control over them.
The fire marshal, who works, who hires the fire marshal?
The fire marshal is a county employee.
And who does he answer to?
He would answer, in this case, to the county manager and to the director of the emergency services.
So if there are decisions that have to be made by the fire marshal, that's over and beyond what the director of the emergency services can do, he goes to the county manager.
Yes.
And then the budgets that we receive from the fire departments, we take it that's what it is, and how do we communicate? Do we communicate through the fire marshal, or how do we communicate?
If you had a specific question about a specific fire department, you would communicate with that fire department, I think.
Will we use the fire marshal as far as protocol?
You could if you wanted to, but you wouldn't have to,
What would be the correct protocol?
whatever the board wants to do.
That's what I'm asking.
Would it be
Do we
the
establish-
board's decision?
Yeah, in order to look at the budgets and to look at the tax rate and to see if the tax rate is adequate for the budget, then of course we would need a liaison. Would that be the fire marshal to go with, I guess, the ideas of the board? How do we receive that information other than the budget being submitted to the finance director and the finance director submitting it to the county manager? And if we've got questions, who's our liaison?
If you had specific questions, you could appoint anybody that you wanted to get that information to you.
Okay,
And right now, the budgets come directly to finance.
I understand. Any other comments from commissioners on this? We'll move on.
Well,
Mr. Cromartie.
just to clear this up just a tad, are we talking about looking at their budgets as relates to any allocation we may make, or the communication we're talking about having to do with some sort of a supervisory level thing? Because unless I missed something, it sounds like they're more independent without, if they're not a department, if you don't have them listed as a department, that means you don't supervise them. Is that
We do
correct?
not.
You do not
They
supervise them.
They are individual entities.
That's what I
Corporations that.
thought I was hearing.
Because by law, county commissioners, I'm now practicing being a lawyer, but by law, you are committed as commissioners to have fire protection in Wayne County or in any county in North Carolina. And you do that via a contract, or you provide fire service in some form. We do it with a contract with paid and volunteer fire departments, and we have a contract for that service. You then have the service district where you collect a tax for the fire department, that we then collect the dollars and send the dollars, Borden, to the fire department.
And it's really not for the fire department,
Yeah,
but it's for fire protection.
Protection, correct. Thank you.
And you could contract with any entity that you could find that would provide that fire protection in that district. And what has traditionally always been is you have had volunteer fire departments that have provided the protection. They tell you what they ask you to tax the people in the district so they can provide the fire protection. and it's the Board of Commissioners that determines what the tax will be. And then you have a contract with them to pay them what you have collected, and no more than what you collect under the current contract.
Go ahead,
And once you collect the tax and give it to them to provide the fire protection, it's in their discretion as to how they spend that money. You don't have control over it after you pay it to them. The control that you have is determining what the tax rate will be and who you're going to pay that money to provide the protection.
So that means that any communication between the fire marshal, who's a county employee, and the communication with, say, a fire chief is communication but not supervision.
Absolutely.
All right,
correct.
that's what I wanted to
It's
get
a
to.
business arrangement.
Thank you, all right, that's where I was
Okay.
going.
But wait, Mr.
Thank
Pate, Mr. Mayo, Mr. Daugherty, then Mr. Acott.
I understand the relationship and it begs the question, how do we determine what's an appropriate tax rate in each district? Who makes that decision?
My question.
I mean, it comes to us, this is what we want, but, I don't know whether it's an appropriate rate or not. I want to make sure they get enough, but we don't need to tax people too much on the other side. You understand what I'm asking? Who makes that decision?
The request is made by the fire department itself, and Mr. Acott was asking, could he?
Well, I know, but we've got questions here, and then these are raising their hands to speak, so I want to make sure we just keep everything
Okay.
in order.
That's
So-
my question.
Okay, Mr. Mayo, Mr. Daugherty, and then Mr. Acott.
Going back to Mr. King's original statement, if the fire marshal just has what I would consider a cordial relationship with the fire departments because he has no authority, in other words, it's a communication thing. If we have questions, this is the way I see it, if we have questions of each fire department, I think in my opinion, we need to go through our fire commissioner, who at this time is Mr. Wayne Acott, because that's where the best relationship is, and I'm not saying anything against the fire marshal, but Mr. Acock's been in the fire department for over 50 years. So he knows fire departments, he knows all the fire departments. Can the fire commissioner get us the information that we need as far as the questions we have? He should be able to as fire commissioner.
Mr. Daugherty.
Well, when I spoke earlier of sacred cows, this may be one of them. Mr. Smith, when a fire department submits a budget to the county justifying their tax rate, is there anybody in finance that queries that and goes through it line item by line item to justify those expenditures?
No. All we do in finance and in my office as a budget team is look to make sure that they say that their expenditures and their revenues match.
Well, I say that in picking up on Commissioner Pate's comment, and that is that a tax is a tax is a tax. And if, in fact, a citizen in our community pays property taxes, it includes two taxes. One would be the ad valorem tax, and the other would be a fire tax. And in looking through all of our budgets, it's rather difficult for us to determine whether or not the tax rate that's recommended and requested by a fire department is in fact justified. Because we don't have access to that. In fact, in this budget book here, it just states basically revenue from the ad valorem tax, the fire tax, rather, and the expenditure for that service. There's no breakdown at all in regards to what is expended. how much reserves there are, how much of that expense is being placed in reserves, how much of that is for vehicles, how much of it is for whatever. And it really puts commissioners in an awkward position here. But the point is that it appears, what I have found is that's just the way it's always been done. And that is, or all fire departments submit a budget to balance their revenues to their expenditures. And I have some serious issues with that in regards to the changes that take place in property values that determine what that fire tax amount will amount to. I.e. example, the Lee plant, the investment by Progress Energy will make a dramatic improvement in the revenues for Marmac because that plant is in Marmac. How does that affect Rosewood? You've got some fire departments that are extremely financially stable, and you've got others that are not. So it's a real issue that at some point someone's going to have to address. We cannot continue to go down the road that's been there for the last century, and that is, you submit a budget, ask for this amount, you automatically approve it, and look, it's your money, do whatever you want to with it. I just think that we're going to have to look at that. And I'm greatly concerned. I'll even go even further, and we'll get into this in here, but I have spent hours going through this budget. And I don't quite understand why we have, right now, have amassed $158,000 that the county is paying from ad valorem taxes toward expenses of fire departments. Now, if in fact we're going to set a tax rate, those expenses should be borne by the fire departments, not by ad valorem taxes. So whatever those expenses are, we need to truly know what the expenses of our fire protection is, because you distort it by doing it that way. If it's an expense that's directly attributed to fire protection, it ought to be in those budgets. It shouldn't be in another budget. So I've got a lot of concerns in regards to that, and I realize I am walking on some thin ice here, but somebody needs to say it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Aycock, I'm going to make very few comments. I'll make my comments later. Remember, each fire department has got two sets of boards. They've got a board of directors for the fire department, and they've got a board for the tax district. And I don't know, I can only speak for one department, but each department should be getting input when they prepare their budget. That fire tax commission should be involved. Now, I can't speak for all the departments because I don't know whether they are or not. And correct me, Mr. Smith, if I'm wrong, on the workers' comp, does the county not get a cheaper rate than what the individual fire departments would get?
Yes, that was part of why that was done, to be able to keep the cost down.
I don't have a problem with the fire departments paying that,
Sure.
paying their, each department
a
paying their
cost-cutting
percentage-wise. I don't have a problem with it coming out of fire tax.
Sure.
But I just want to make sure that everyone knew
It's
that.
kind of
that-
more volume, you reduce the
Right.
cost, sure.
Right. And I think it's substantial amount in it.
Yeah, it is. I recall right off, but yes, it is. Yeah, 50,000.
Yeah. And I'll make the rest of my comments at a later time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Aycock. Any others? Okay, we're finished with the organizational chart. Yep, thank you. Revenue summary.
Now, we've got a couple of avenues here on, you've got the actual, first you'll hit the overall, this is a lot more generic in revenues, these first sheets. you'll see, for instance, when you go across the page, on page 3, under that tab, you'll see general fund 1314, under my recommendation of 75.8 million, based on where we see collections coming in, sales tax, those type things. So, but then what you will do is when you get to the larger tab of revenues, under 110, and this is 2 tabs back, you get into the details of those revenues. Okay? The first page is a summary. You know, that first section's a summary. Then you get into it says in revenue, in green, revenues, starts at general fund on 3100 110, you'll see current tax levy. So if you want to go through the general, we can do that, but then there's detail behind that. Do you want me to start with the general and then jump back as we need to? Okay.
Yes, sir. And
Okay.
I guess the idea here would be an easy flow through the summary individually if the commissioners have a question. The request of mine was to actually put our last couple of years to give us some indication of what it was 2 years ago,
Yes.
and then look at what it was after the revalve was accomplished and what it was that year. And then, and these are actuals, and you've done that. You've gone to 2010 to 2011.
Yeah, that was prior to revalve.
That was prior to, and
11-12
11-12 is revalve. So as we all know, there was about a 17% increase for the whole county.
That's correct.
I think it went from about a $5.9 billion to about a $7 billion.
Right at $7 billion.
So the second column, all the way to the left, that second column there where it says 11-12. And then you go over to the manager's request. But the final department, that was from the departments, and then, of course, you have brought your suggestions in the manager's column.
That's right.
So that's an easy flow for the commissioners to see. So if you'll just start with that and to give the commissioners an idea of what it was and what it is today.
All right. First, under general fund, and these include property taxes, sales taxes, and all those things that we collect. And you will see going across at 75.8 million is what we are estimating. Now, one thing I do want to mention, when you go to that green tab and you look at current tax levy, even with reval or looking at what you may over-collect, you can only collect up to a point. In other words, I couldn't say, well, I think because I added XYZ Corporation and this and that, I can't estimate that. I have to see it, and I have to have history of it a year, and then I can begin to claim it. In other words, I can't presume it's going to come in, and I have to tell you across state, there are probably some who do that. The law says you're not supposed to do that. Sorry, board, but they do. And I've been places where they did that. Well, I don't do that, and Pam and Janice don't do that. We base it on as much history as possible. So you got to remember something, particularly on property taxes. When you get to the 7th year, Borden, which we're approaching, the utility companies have the ability to adjust their value every 7 years, correct? Is it 7? 4 and 7. So we're approaching that again.
I believe September we'll know the true figure.
That's correct. Duke Progress.
And the state is the one that makes that decision, as they look to see what your values are, and then they decide what the rate goes for all the utilities.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I just want, because that's a big one. And when you get into those years of that 4 or 7 of adjustment, you really got to watch it and kind of back off. So Pam, David, Alan, Janice, all of us sit down and really try to back off of that because of depreciation, those type of things. They could pull out, and it can be hundreds of millions of dollars, and we have to be very cautious of that. So we try to be conservative in those estimates. I'd rather it be a little high than be low, because that's when you get in trouble. So we don't do that here. So when you look at summary, the general fund, again, sales taxes, property tax. Just going through the summary, and then we can hit details you want to. Court facilities. Board, and these are facilities collected through the court system, and we use those dollars for things like the video arraignment system. They also assist with improvements, furniture in the state offices. You are required to give them space, okay? But we use these dollars to help pay for some of the things that they need. The state has slowly but surely passing off all the costs to us of wiring their computer systems, and used to, they paid for it, not anymore. We have to pay for it. Every year I see a little more, another $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000. I will tell you, by the end of this year, with this $166,000, I bet we actually will go on the whole of that. We'll be paying $10,000, $20,000 on our own. It's gone up that much in the last few years.
So you're saying we're going to lose the $166,000
That's what we
as
call
income?
Yes. And it used to just about pay for itself. Well, not for the space, just the things that they need. It's beginning to go in the hole now because the state is putting more of those expenses on us by law. And it's getting expensive. It's not.
So you're saying that the court facilities, which is this
The
court
166.
system, that's the judges, lawyers, all
Clerk's office.
clerks. So the
The
state.
DA.
So the state, are you saying the state or the county? No, you're saying the feds or the states give monies.
The state.
The state gives monies for this, and 2 years ago it was $234,000. Last year it was $206,000, and you're saying we're only going to receive $166,000 this year.
We're getting a double whammy. We're seeing that go down because the state gets more of the fees, but we're also seeing more of the cost by the state. Keep banging on the state. But we're seeing more of, they're sending more of their costs to operate to us.
Yes.
And so we're getting a double whammy here, and I think we'll be in the hole at least 20 grand this year, where we've tried to curb it. It keeps going the other way. We're having to pick up more.
And
Mr.
I don't mind banging the state, and I'll bang them on this. This legislation, in my opinion, probably will pass that is going to require you to pay court costs. Current law does not require the county to pay court costs when it files an action. And then you collect it if you win the suit, particularly in tax cases. Last legislature changed and raised the rates that you had to pay, all the court costs, substantially. Didn't put them back into court facilities or court actions, put it into the general fund. But the county still didn't have to pay those court costs up front. Now, there's legislation that I fear is going to pass that's going to require the county to pay up front.
Okay.
So it's going to be more expense on the county.
We've actually added some of that in the departments where we're having to do this. That's an expense we've had to pick up because we think it's going to happen. And
Was
I
that
didn't
passed
give you a
through?
year.
Was that passed through the Senate on the Passover? Is it in the House now?
I think I've got it in this folder. I'll try to look at it.
We'll
Take a
confirm
break.
But the association, I talked to Kevin, is it Kevin, I
Yes.
believe? And maybe 3 weeks ago, and that was one of the subjects, and they said, you're going to get hit with it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's one of those, okay? Let's see, county capital reserve, sales tax,
New animal shelter.
that's just a line item that's sitting there. The reason we put that in there were times that we may get donations or something like that.
Okay.
And, yeah. And but we just, as we get them in the year, add them. And when we do get some, a couple years ago, we wound up getting $850,000 for construction, so we leave it there. County cap reserve sales tax, that is collected on the school side. The $3.99.
That 39.44.
Yeah. Put over there for the schools.
Okay, my question there is, 2 years ago it was $3,500,000 and it was $3,900,000. But the amended budget in 12-13 was $6 million. Why was it amended? Do you remember?
Wasn't it because we actually transferred the money out of the overall reserve and that pushed that up in the expenditure side, right? We actually gave them so much money. Is that correct? I believe that's correct. They actually requested dollars, and when we did, it pushes that up, pushes that number up. It's not that they received more. They have so much in reserve, requested some money, we paid the money out, so it pushes that number up. It's not that they collected another $3 million. They got their $3 or $4 million, and they had money in reserve and utilized some of the reserve. And it makes that number look higher, because I've got to count it somewhere as a revenue
Sure.
out of the reserve.
Well, anytime it passes through and you have to show it.
It inflates that.
It inflates it.
Yes.
It's like we looked at the budget, and of course, we see 181 million. It's all of these that are added to through the year that pushes it up to that.
Correct.
So the amount here, I didn't know if that was the amount that was put in for the addition that they asked for the 1.5 million for the furnitures and so forth, and then 500,000 for the vehicles, whenever we did the 15 million for the two schools, Eastern Wayne
Eastern Wayne,
Middle
Norway, and I think
Norway.
some of that was the payout.
I didn't
on
know if some of
Because they
that,
requested some of their money.
was that some of it, or is that
That is some
somewhere
of
else?
it. That is some of it. Because you have to count it as a revenue when it transfers from that reserve.
I didn't know if it was, I
We can pull
don't think
it.
that's
We'll
it.
pull it.
I think the other part was from the QSCAB project
Yeah.
and some other later on the project, but
Yeah, because they did
I'm
use
not
some
sure
of
that's the
those.
one.
We'll give you the detail. We're
If you
making it,
would.
I'm gonna do it, I'll give you detail.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's back to 3.9 million you're looking at, but I was wondering why it was, I just wanted to find out what the amendment was to run it up to 6
It
million.
was that transfer out of that reserve. I feel certain it was, but we're gonna give you
But for
detail.
what reason?
Okay, we'll
Thank
do
you.
that and give you detail.
Okay,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Yeah, because they send a detailed request when they make.
I like,
a request.
yes, I like
Yes,
that.
okay. Next, US 70 Quarter Commission. We manage those dollars, and we typically receive somewhere in the neighborhood of $125,000 annually. And that also accounts for our $25,000 that comes out of our general fund and goes into that fund. That's the total of $125,000. That's all we pick up is the $25,000.
Question. They, you got 125 before, the final department is what, 375,000? Why was there such a difference?
Because this last year, that was actually part of the contract,
With Cambridge, 250.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, I forgot about that.
so it alters
I
it.
got you, I got you.
Here again, it's the gross
So it's
versus
been
the net.
encumbered now.
Yeah,
Right.
I forgot about that.
And that's where the gross versus the net's just another example that we got.
That's right.
NCDOT
It's a grant.
allowed $250,000 to come through for Cambridge. And
That
we're
250 would
moving it
be
to
in
the-
that gross side,
Right.
where it, I say falsely inflates, but it inflates it, but yet it has no real impact in the cost to local taxpayers.
Right.
Yes.
So if I could ask. a
Yes, sir,
question,
Mr. Daugherty.
Just so my understanding. So basically, this fiscal year, we turned around and allocated the 250,000 as a receipt, and then we put that into a restricted account
And we were.
for payment at a later time. So we would not have to have any additional budget amendments on that 250.
We're
As the-
reappropriating that, and it will carry over. In other words, if it should not take more than this fiscal year. They say it will be done by January. But let's say it did, we would reappropriate into 2014-15. Let's say there was 20,000 left over to finish part, or if they get the 795 piece added on and that goes into 14-15, we would do a reappropriation.
So once a purchase order, I don't know what you may call that, but once a purchase order is issued
Yes.
for the 250 or any amount, it's obligated funds,
They are encumbered.
and they are encumbered.
Correct.
So it's set aside over there, and as the bills come in, you pay out of that.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
And we've got a process where the chair, myself, as project managers, are verifying those costs.
Sure.
Through Sanford, Holzhauser, Cambridge, we verify it, and and then we do a pre-audit stamp by the finance officer, then I would sign off. So there's about a 6-piece checkoff list before we make any payments.
Thank you.
Okay, Children Youth Council, and this is one of those that is a grant that we have not anticipated yet, correct?
That's the JCPC stuff.
But that we amend as as it goes in after July 1st.
We don't even know how much money.
Oh, okay, that's a grant. I was gonna ask a question.
We'll amend it as it comes in. And you'll see a number in July and August, some past members know, we will bring to you amendments that hit that gross budget. In other words, if it's a $200,000 expenditure, there's a $200,000 grant right behind it. We don't match it, you know.
So that gives some explanation of how, if you got a budget that's adopted as of June 30th for $158 million, through the year, through grants and
It goes to
pass-through
170.
dollars as such,
Yeah.
it increases that amount to what
To
it
180.
was 181.
That's right.
So that's how it
Grant,
increases.
Because we do not, it has been our staff policy and the board not to anticipate something we think may or may not happen.
That's a good policy.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing we would anticipate is if we had to make a match. I would put the match in there and say, here's the expenditure, there's some grants coming, but I would probably include that because that's real. And that would be in the net budget.
Well, I received several calls regarding the article stating, well, if you, at 158, how'd you end up with 181 million? I mean, you guys are spending money like I don't know what.
Yeah.
And that's the impression.
I
And
know.
we've got to do a better job of educating.
And that's part of why I started off on gross and net. And,
Right,
and,
I agree.
You know, we've talked about doing something on TV and doing some little news pieces to help explain that because that is confusing. But I think it's the better way to do it, that you don't overinflate the budget or overinflate the need for a tax rate.
Okay,
You know, so,
thank you.
okay, good. All right, let's see, please.
See.
Senior Citizens Programs, you'll see going across, well, that is the, and not because our chair has sat on that board for years, but I will tell you, the monies we receive through East Carolina Council, I know the membership has been questioned over the years with East Carolina Council. It's one of the best dollars we spend. You know, for, I think, a couple of bucks, we get like 9 or 10 back for our, particularly for our seniors. That works. So that's over $1 million we're receiving in grants, and most of that comes through East Carolina Council. 4-H program.
Excuse me, just a
Go ahead,
question.
Mr. Pate.
I just noticed, a pretty big growth in that. Is that because we got the senior center, or are we just getting more money from the council?
I'm sorry, population. Yeah, it's the population is what really hits this time, because you'll see, actually, I had a question from a taxpayer who came in the office, they said, well, since our population has grown, won't we get more sales tax money? I said, great question. If everybody else stayed the same, yes. But my problem is that Raleigh and Mecklenburg grew at a faster rate and get a bigger piece of the pie, which means, I don't know. That's why we're trying to hold back on sales tax, because we don't know what it's going to do, because the pie is the same. It's that sometimes our piece gets squeezed based on population. Though you grew, your piece may be smaller because other areas grew faster than you did. So I think you've talked about that before, but it's a good point. It's based on population.
Eastern Carolina Council of Governments, 82% of those funds that come in from the federal government are area on aging, and then a little bit is RPO, and as we discussed the day before yesterday, technical assistance through grants and so forth for infrastructure in these municipalities. But the majority of funds that are looked at by population, they take into account the age in your county, in that population. As you heard me say, that 26.8% in 2000 was over 50, now 32.4, 33.2, or somewhere right in there is over 50, the total population in Wayne County. So as they look at a growing age in your county, that helps too. And then, of course, your Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3s, whatever. So all that data, Mr. Kamari or Mr. Pate is put in, and then you receive accordingly.
We're getting old,
Of
aren't
course, we're an old, the senior center, but the senior center did not hurt when they
glad
see
we're getting it.
what we did to help the seniors in making that. They look at that too. It's graded. Your county's graded. Yeah, Mr. Aycock?
Yeah, this question may not have a whole lot to do with the budget, but I'd still like to know. The senior center, we do own it now, lock, stock, and barrel?
Yes,
Okay.
we do. It's paid for. That's great. 4-H program, we talked about that. That's part of the dollars between grants, fees, is that everything?
Yes, but this year we made them, we did not let them budget for all those grants. In years past, they had budgeted for the grants, the expenditures, and the revenue, and this year, like throughout the budget, we didn't let them, anticipate those grants, not until they come in and we have them award letters for sure.
We have some that we are questioning greatly. We hope they get them. But there are a couple of those that, and Grecian was very, and Kevin, upfront with us. There's a possibility they could get cut. And if they do, that means they would have a decrease in service because we don't pick those up. We said, let's not put it in here and spend July and August money. And then, I'm on the hook for 60 days of cost and no grant. So we've cut it. And that means she may have to slow her progress down for a couple months till she gets the money. And she understands that.
I was going to ask, because we talked about fees a few minutes ago, and the question came up in 4-H, preschool, after-school care. Does that in any way affect this figure?
No.
So the fees that are brought in is separate than what you're saying here is you've gone from 549,000 to 526,000, and you're saying you're not anticipating the grant, or you're not working in the grants, so you're down 200,000. So you got 321,000 that you're looking at revenue. Are the fees on that 4-H program, any of that in there?
This include the daycare expenditures and, revenue.
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 But it does not include that 21st Century Grant and the YPF grant and.
Those are several $100,000.
There were separate little grants that she had for separate programs, so we kept that out.
So where does this money come from if we're not putting the grants in there?
This is the after-school.
After-school
program that
fees.
includes the fees.
So the, if there are no grants and you're not working those grants in, you have revenue of 321,000.
This does include the 21st Century Grant.
The 21st, do you know how much that is?
We'll find out, we'll give that to you, but it was being reduced greatly. And so we backed off of those. If we think we're not getting it, we have backed off of it and taken the expenditure out and the revenue out. And if they get it, they can add them back, but we'll bring that to you. You have to approve it when it happens.
I understand.
Yeah.
But you've got a $200,000 difference of revenue, and if you've worked the grants out of it then, and you've got the fees for the schools, the preschool and after school, I was just trying to get in my mind, is the program eventually going to go away? Because the way I understand it is we need that school care before school, the daycare, the afternoon care. Is it going to sustain itself? Are we getting enough fees? I'm just looking at, if the grants go away, how do we sustain it?
The 4-H after-school program would.
Would what?
Would be able to sustain itself the way they're going now. But these other grants, there are programs that they then give outside and within that 4-H program that you may not be able to do. Their numbers may shrink.
Okay.
And the waiting list will go up.
Yeah. Okay.
But she does it based on service. So she'll say, okay, if I have 20 kids, I have to have 1.5 people. So if I go to 10, I have to have 1 person. So she controls that based on daycare rules, all
That's
those
right.
things.
There's certifications there.
Exactly.
Okay.
You know that.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions so far? Okay.
The youth outreach, that is a program we've not, it's zeroed out. We haven't had that in some time. Wayne County Development Alliance, and this basically is the transfer, I guess the 419-048, right? That's the transfer.
What transfer you speaking
We
of?
actually, that's the part that we fund. We actually fund, we actually pay salaries and that type of thing, but we actually fund some of the things within WCDA. So we have to transfer those dollars. We do a 1/12 every month, and that's part of that transfer.
So this is all.
But these are county dollars.
This is all taxpayer
Yes,
dollars.
this is all county taxpayer.
It's not, no grants?
No. All county taxpayer.
Any questions?
Well,
Mr. Donovan?
somewhat, and this probably gets over into the governance side of that, in that economic development is critical for Wayne County.
Yes.
I think my concern would be that with the county taxpayers funding that organization, I would certainly feel more comfortable if we had more representation on the actual decision-making board. I am concerned in regards to anytime tax dollars go into any organization where there's not a check and a balance from governance standpoint to make sure those dollars are carefully monitored. Not saying they're not carefully monitored, I'm just saying it kind of opens up the process where you're funding something without representation.
Well,
And
one thing,
so-
and I understand that on the membership, but one thing we were able to, and I applaud Borden and years ago when we were able to join the committees of 100 and the county together and bring our assets together. The one thing we were able to do is that the county manager would set, and it would actually work as a secretary treasurer. So any checks that are written, I have to view. Which, so even, and that's something, you guys were talking about other representation on that board, but the one thing it's able then, I'm able to bring those things back and view weekly, all expenses, all checks, and it does give us at least another set of eyes. So I know that may not fully what you want, but at least we're able to keep our hands in there and feel comfortable with at least the expenses.
Thank
you. Next, you got waste.
Also, just before we move on that, we do have, whenever we had our changeover in December, there's 3 commissioners that sit on that board. Mr. Mayo, Mr. Aycock, and myself. And this, of course, again, is the regionally appointed boards. Luke, this is the, hold on a second. I'm looking back at the organizational chart. Here it is. Yeah, the appointing governing boards and Board of Elections, Board of Health, Social Services, and the Wayne County Development Alliance. So there are 3 commissioners that sat on that, and that particular board also elected Mr. Smith to continue as its treasurer. Treasurer. So we this time we have 3 commissioners and Mr. Smith on the board. Okay. Mr. Mayor.
Being a member of the board of WCDA, this is just a comment, basically. And it's an opinion because of what's going on on the state, from the state level, as far as the legislature. It looks like that the 7 regions, like the eastern region, is going to be reorganized possibly, and it looks like something's going to happen. What I'm saying is that the Wayne County Development Alliance is going to have a much larger responsibility if there's a transition from these regions. Who's going to be out there beating the bushes for new industry to come into eastern North Carolina? The Wayne County Development Alliance is going to have to pick that up until a new organization on the regional level is established by the legislature. So I'm just saying, beware, there's got to be some really kick up in the Wayne County Development Alliance, because the bottom line is we are responsible for getting industry in our county when you get to the bottom line. We're the ones that's going to have to give industry, possible industry, the incentives to even come here. So I just want to make that comment, is that there are major changes as far as the way our industry economic development is going.
We get a lot of referrals.
You get a lot of referrals, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others, comments? We will be taking a 10-minute break at 10 o'clock, so just to give you.
You read my mind. Wayne Community College. You will see there 3.932011. And this is expenditure, but this is basically the transfer from our general fund for them. But this is 100% county money.
$3,932,000.
011. And we'll be going over the expenditures later.
Yes.
But these are just the revenues. Revaluation. We are estimating, you'll see that kind of go up and down, and we've talked about this before. Statutorily, you put dollars aside to prepare for your reval based on if you're 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, case 8 years. And we're estimating that to be $115,000, and we'll talk about the expenditures, but that's county money. Okay, next you'll see the public assistance. Right at $19.9 million. Now, in that, part of it is the transfer plus the county money,
You have a breakdown?
plus fund balance. When we get into the expenditure side, we'll
Okay.
give you a breakdown. When we get into health and DSS, we'll talk about those specifically. It's kind of hard to get into that without getting into the expenditure side, because we are requiring full use of their fund balances, are pretty close this year, that have been built. So I really want to get into that, because otherwise I think it's going to be confusing. Is that all right? We
Yes,
are going
sir.
to get to it.
Is this another that'll probably go up because of block grants that'll come in at a later date?
Yes, it does this business, and I will tell you, that number will go up July through October. That's one of those that really pushes you based on what you receive. One is going to be that we have taken out of here is over $1 million in energy assistance. LEAP. We've taken that out because I'm not sure how that's going to go, so we'll have to come back for that later in the year, because I don't know what it's going to be, but I hate to count it if I don't know what it's going to be. But there's one of those. I mean, that pushes it up greatly. So we don't want states.
Well, the actual so far right now is about 13 million.
Mhm.
So this was probably through last month.
Mhm.
So we've
Yeah.
still got a ways to go before we hit the 18 million that
Exactly.
we're budgeted.
Exactly.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and we actually carry over in the year, and we actually pay some things out in July for June because of the way their bills run. So, and actually will hit, and you'll see it in the audit. The auditors help us with that and make that adjustment in the audit, and you will see that we made those June payments in July, and we get to count them because we have to meet maintenance of effort. And I'm sure you've heard that term. So, okay. Emergency telephone, that's part of the 911. And you'll see that that's what we're hoping for. Plus transfer,
That's the 129 part, so.
that's the wire, that's the hard line part. That's the hard line, not the wireless.
That's all county money.
Yep, that's all transfer of county. Mm-hmm. Then the next one, you'll see public health.
Mr. Aycock?
Sorry.
Going back to the emergency telephone,
Yep.
correct me, wasn't there some legislation introduced this year to free up some of those funds, or either transfer them where they would be easy?
That's what but
I don't know what's passed or not, but it had,
this is, in my opinion, this right now is worst case scenario for us.
okay.
Hopefully, if they free up use of it, then we could reduce some usage, but some of the language they'll use is non-supplanting. Well, that doesn't help me, because then they're saying I can't back off what I planned for. That doesn't help us, so we're saying you got to keep that language out of there. If it's our money collected from Wayne County folks, we should be able to use it for 911. So, I mean, you're right. So that number, it's obviously it's a guess, but we don't know what the state's going to do, so we're waiting. But right now, that's county money.
Okay.
Public health, you'll see right at 8.5 million, and that's the transfer. And that includes, that's county dollars.
Could I comment on that?
Yes. Yes. Mr. Daugherty?
Please note that is a $352,000 reduction. Please note that. Over the amended budget.
Correct.
Thank you.
We'll get into that.
We'll get into that down the road. Please note that.
That's right.
That's all about.
Mr. Daugherty serves on the health board, and they have worked real hard to reduce their budget this year,
They have.
and worked and done very well.
They've worked us over and negotiated really hard with us. But that's all right. That's good stuff. It's good business.
But if you go back to 2 years ago, it was 7.5 million, then the following year it was 7.7 million, and we're up 8.4 million.
Yeah. That's given the reason you did the health impact meeting.
Yes, sir.
It's increasing cost in prevention is huge.
But again, these are revenues.
That's right. Cable TV franchise, these are dollars when you look at now, this has been one of those, next couple of years it's gone. It's going away. It keeps dwindling. The state gets more of it. And we use it just as a general fund. We used to use it for specific projects when we used to pay for PAC-10, that type thing. But now it's just a general fund revenue. But give it a couple of years, it's going away. Been in this 27 years, it's going away.
Tell me how that works. There's a 2
It's a
years ago.
surcharge. There's a surcharge on your cable bill. And all of the cable franchises in Wayne County, we used to assess a cable franchise cost in Wayne County and all counties in North Carolina and cities. They took that away and they said, we will collect a state franchise fee. And when they did, they said, oh, by the way, we're only going to give you X of it. And they keep decreasing what they give us every year. I'm telling you, that's going away. If it's here in 2 years, I'll be surprised. Just look at what it's done.
Oh, yeah, 2 years ago, it was 523,000, then it went up to 559,000 last year.
Yeah.
But then the department was asking for 524, and then your suggestion was 205.9. There was quite a bit difference there in drop, and it's in question of why it dropped. Your revenue projections dropped so much on
the franchise. It's the state use of the funds. I mean, they actually are allocating you less of the money. They're collecting the same money. Now, the other thing is they have had an industry hit, and this is cell phones and smartphones. I still don't think it's been, and you're hearing some on the floor, and I'm glad to hear our legislators talk about it. You have people now, this thing and this, where I may have internet on this. Am I getting charged a surcharge? I could get cable TV on this. Am I getting a surcharge? So should you be? Probably. A lot of states have it where you're getting a fee on it. We have not kept our legislation up with technology, and we are 20 years behind catching up. Fees to technology, and we're missing. It's like that internet, how local, that whole deal about local sales and sales tax. Our guys are being mistreated locally, and that they're in that disadvantaged position. So.
Okay. Mr. Donner?
Are we being overly cautious in regards to anticipated revenues in that line item?
On cable TV?
Yeah.
This is just the fund balance. This is just the fund balance that we're obligating here.
But because we don't know what we're going to do.
This is back to your debt. This is just what we're going to use.
But because we don't know what the other's going to be doing, if any. If any. That's why we did it. Is that right? Because Pam and I talked about it. We didn't know if we would get anything. Yeah, because we do have, how much do we have sitting over there? Do you remember? $1 million or so sitting in there. It's part of the general fund, dollars.
When the
counts.
commissioners initially adopted the cable franchise ordinance, there was a provision that said the fees that came from that had to go for special programs. And then subsequently, the state took the fees away from the counties, and the statute says how you can use those fees based on how you were using them previously.
Yeah.
Pam and I went through that.
Yeah, it's
to try to figure out how to free this money.
yeah. And I think Pam, in trying to look at this, is doing the right thing. I will say now, this is, if you get to a point that there's some things that you wanted to look at in the budget and not move numbers up or down, they're one of those that we tried to be conservative on. If you're looking at another 100 or 2,000, you might be able to push that up, but I'm always cautious about doing that because I don't know if I'm going to get it. But what I'm telling you is you might. But I'm trying to be conservative.
Did I just understand we're taking this from fund balance, though?
Well, it's a fund balance usage of the cable franchise dollars to do certain things.
We have collected the tax.
And you have to show
Put it
you
in a
so, and you
fund.
have to show you so.
And we are allocating 205,000 of that out of that fund.
And you know what I use it for?
Well, wait a minute.
Television and all
Okay,
that stuff.
But we are still going to anticipate some additional revenues going into the fund this year, but
Probably a
these
couple
are
hundred
actually
thousand.
coming out of the fund of
It's
taxes
to
already
transfer.
assessed.
To transfer.
Transferring it out. Is that, am I correct?
Yeah, because when we get it, it goes right into that reserve.
All right.
And then I have to pull it out of the reserve with your
Now, I understand you to
permission.
say that we are restricted on how we may use those funds.
Commissioners, when the funds were, when the ordinance was originally passed.
Right.
To have the fee, restricted the use of those funds to special projects. In other words, it would not go into the general fund.
When you say special projects, define special projects.
You defined the special project.
Okay, now we understand. So if this board defines special projects,
Yep.
it may take those funds from those funds accumulated in the reserve off the cable TV franchise fees that have been received.
Sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And when the state took it over, it's my legal opinion that that money was not necessarily restricted to special projects. And that's where Pam is transferring some of this money from.
And we are going to get an amount of how much is in that fund?
Yes.
Yes.
It's actually in the audit, but yeah, we'll do that. We're making a note of it right now. Now, Pam and I talked this before she left. I can go in there and say, okay, well, I'll try. I think I'm going to get another 200,000, in that reserve. So I could raise that to 405,000. But I then have to raise the expenditure side. See what I'm saying? So what I do is try to keep the transfer from the reserve as low as possible so I don't, again, falsely inflate the budget, because what was it for?
I understand.
If I add it, I need to add it somewhere, I have to send it somewhere. And I just don't send it out into contingency land in the budget.
Sure.
Because we've cut contingencies out. Okay,
Yeah,
I
this
know
is-
that's clear as mud, but
No, this is,
I'm just glad you're asking. I mean, this is the stuff we go through every day.
and I think too, is in layman terms, is that when you say inflate, you look at, does balancing the budget at the end of the year, which we do by statute, by rule and law, that we balance the budget, that do you raise your expenditures to match your revenues, or do you decrease your revenues to meet the expenditures? And here you're saying if they're over here, you put them over here, then you have revenues, and then at the end of the year, you have to raise your expenditures to match those revenues, but you don't want to have to get to that point.
That's
So
right.
you put your monies here to
Because if not, then they just fall out, and it becomes, in my opinion, it's false. I mean, so let's try to get it as accurate as possible.
Got it.
And that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Yeah. It's an accurate reflect, or more accurate reflection.
Any further questions? I think too is that we're looking a list over here to what this is, saying that if it's over here, if it's in an account, a savings account,
And we've
so
got that.
I've heard some say a slush fund, so I mean, if we need to define what's over here as far as restrictions. That wasn't from one of the commissioners, just constituents, and that's
No.
fine. But it's, we listen to our constituents. And if we have that fund, what is encumbered, what is restricted, what is it for, and what is
That's
it
right.
not for? So when big dollar things come up, we know that that
Exactly.
money is not restricted or encumbered or tied to one of these.
Kind of like we get into the Davenport thing. We
Sure.
start looking at
Exactly.
capital reserves, why?
Exactly. And
Yeah,
that will be
yeah,
next
that's a good
month.
point,
Yep.
good point.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you.
And here's a, the next one, Wayne County Public Schools. This is current expense. This is the transfer you will make to the schools that we are anticipating of $18,907,994.
And CO, was that in?
That is capital outlay.
Okay.
Now, what I have done is, obviously, they had a request that, this is the transfer of $2 million. We're anticipating a transfer of $2 million from that sales tax reserve of $2 million. Now, there was a request of 3.4, I believe. I have talked to Dr. Taylor since, and looks like we're going to back that number off. And I've told him I have placed it in at $2 million, and he seemed fairly satisfied with that. So we would only transfer out of that fund $2 million. I've not had any discussion about all the other issues that the board talked the other night. So we're going to have that discussion in the near future about use of that fund.
For the commissioners, I've instructed Mr. Smith to take figures and go ahead and proceed with Davenport and get Davenport all the numbers that they normally get when we're looking for expenditures above and beyond this, and they will have those reports Monday. And it looks like that is down toward the end of our budget book. So I think Monday we will be loaded up pretty good to answer any of the questions.
Yeah. And it's kind of a first
In our work
step.
session.
It's the first blush of what impact would it have. Okay. Let's see. Road improvement fund, we don't have that. Revaluation, that was just a change because some of those are zeroed out. There's the emergency telephone service fund. Chance, which one is that one? Is that the? That's the
225.
That's the 225. That's the restricted, and that's the one that Mr. Aycock's talking about. We're hoping to get more dollars from, because as you can see, that's the one that decreased huge. I mean, just 2010 was almost 1.5 million. I mean, we got hit for $1 million. That's been huge to us. And basically, county taxpayers picked up 2 cents on the tax rate in the last couple of years to pick up 911.
So that is the 911.
Yeah, and that's where we're asking. The money's there. We just need to get it. But they won't let us get
We're
it.
not talking about the other line item, emergency telephone. This is another line item.
This is, yes,
different.
this is the restricted 911 funds that Mr. Aycock was talking about in the legislation. And we're hoping that will free that up. But right now, if legislation is like it is, we'll be lucky to get that. That's hit us hard. You're getting ready to hit the fire departments, or what they are. Did you want to break this?
Mr. Aycock?
Back on the 911, just keep in mind now, this is strictly for incoming calls, correct?
That's right.
No outgoing calls.
Anything that's outgoing, we have to pay
We
for
have
it.
to pay.
That's right. Mr. Chairman, do you want to take the break now before we hit these other things?
Sure.